Between Eurasia and North America, between the US and Russia, there are only about 50 miles across the Bering Strait. Yet, people still have no shortest way to cross from one continent to the other. There's no crossing at all. Sure, on the map, it looks like nothing, but you can't just build a road here. The Bering Strait's one of the harshest places on the planet. Icy waters, freezing temperatures, earthquakes, constant storms, and most importantly, ice that stays here for 8 to 10 months a year and never stops moving. Still, a tunnel under the strait could be built. Sounds crazy, but it's actually possible. Let's figure out what could really be done to make the route shorter and what that would lead to. There used to be a land route. If we could go back in time now, there wouldn't be anything to connect. There was no strait between Russia and Alaska, no water, no ice, just land you could walk across. Scientists call it the Bering Land Bridge, though of course it wasn't really a bridge. It was a piece of continent linking Eurasia and North America, and quite a wide one, almost 600 miles across. This was during the Ice Age, when a huge part of the planet's water turned into ice and sea levels dropped by about 400 feet. The sea simply retreated, revealing dry land and opening a path between the continents. Scientists call that land Beringia. It wasn't an icy desert, as one might think, but a cold steppe, where mammoths, horses, and bison roamed. In fact, Beringia was a giant natural bridge of life. Not only people, but whole ecosystems could move across it. When archaeologists find ancient animal bones in the permafrost, it's like opening a time capsule. Grass, tundra, and thousands of miles of wild space where life thrived even at -20. But nothing in nature lasts forever. When the Ice Age came to an end, Earth began to slowly thaw. The ice melted, sea levels rose, and about 10 to 11,000 years ago, Beringia disappeared underwater. In its place appeared the Bering Strait, with icy currents and storms now dividing the two continents. The people who stayed on opposite sides began living apart, some in Chukotka, others in Alaska. And of course, you can cross the Bering Strait without a ship even today, right over the ice. In winter, the sea partially freezes, and a real ice maze forms between Russia and the US. It's not a smooth road, but a field of blocks and cracks that constantly shift and move apart. The most famous crossing of the strait happened in 1998. That's when a Russian traveler and his son decided to ski across the ice from Chukotka to Alaska, with no support, through one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. It took them 3 weeks, battling constant ice drifts that could destroy their route at any moment. The temperature dropped below -40 degrees Fahrenheit, the wind knocked them off their feet, and they had to pitch their tents right on drifting ice floes. But the adventurers made it, and their journey was recorded in the Guinness World Records as the first successful, unpowered crossing of the Bering Strait. However, in terms of real, stable connection between the continents, that means nothing. Ordinary people aren't going to pull off a feat like that on a regular basis, and trade between the two countries would be out of the question. Trains and trucks would simply sink just 6 feet off the shore. A connection is needed, solid and reliable. Modern crossing. The first thing that comes to mind is a bridge. Just imagine a nearly 60-mile structure, a true engineering feat that would go down in history. But all of that looks good only in pictures and dreams. In reality, the weather here is so harsh that even ships sometimes don't dare to go out to sea. The ice is constantly shifting, colliding, pressing with the force of thousands of tons. Any bridge support simply wouldn't withstand those blows. It would bend and break. Don't forget about hurricanes, snow, fog, and temperature swings from -40 to 32 degrees Fahrenheit. In short, as Gandalf would say, you shall not pass. Such conditions quickly cause metal fatigue and concrete cracks. The bridge would be under constant strain. It would have to be inspected and repaired every single day. Plus, the ground beneath the strait isn't stable. There are tectonic faults here, earthquakes happen, and all that makes the structure even more vulnerable. Even if you build ultra-strong supports, there's no guarantee the bridge won't start falling apart in a few years. In such conditions, no engineering can save it. So a bridge across the Bering Strait isn't a project of the future. It's a recipe for an endless battle with nature. And it's not something you can just build quickly. The construction season in the strait lasts only 2 to 4 months, roughly from July to October when the sea is free of ice. The rest of the time, everyone has to stay safe. That's good news for the builders, but bad news for those waiting for the bridge to be finished. Construction would take around 15 to 20 years, and that's being optimistic. But if things are bad on the surface, there's always a way to go underground, right? Humanity has proven time and again that it can build paths beneath the surface, so a tunnel under the Bering Strait is perfectly doable. The ice may move, collide, or break apart, but below, deep down, everything stays calm. No impacts, no hurricane winds. Down there, the temperature is stable. There's no freezing, no stress on the materials. Metal doesn't crack, concrete doesn't split. Everything works in one steady mode without constant fluctuations. And this isn't a fight against nature, it's a clever cooperation with it. We build where nature can't interfere. Safety's another advantage. Even if a storm is raging outside or the ground trembles a bit, the tunnel can be designed with a compensation system. Modern underwater tunnels are built to handle earthquakes and water pressure, and they stand strong for decades. Take the Seikan Tunnel in Japan or the Channel Tunnel between France and England. They've survived tremors, leaks, and storms, and they're still operational. The same goes for the Bering Strait. Sealed sections, flexible joints, backup ventilation, and power systems. All this is long within our reach, just expensive and time-consuming. And most importantly, a tunnel can be used all year round. It doesn't depend on seasons, temperature, ice, or storms. Transport can run non-stop, ensuring a steady connection between continents. A bridge would constantly battle the elements, while a tunnel quietly does its job underwater. So if we're to link Eurasia and North America, it should be under the sea, not above it. Still, building it wouldn't be easy. For one, the tunnel would stretch about 50 miles, and we've never built anything that long. The Channel Tunnel is 31 miles long, and Japan's Seikan is 33. But 50 miles? That's a whole new level. Then again, even that distance isn't a deal breaker for modern technology. There are tunnel boring machines that can drill tens of feet a day. Sure, it wouldn't make construction short, but it would certainly finish faster than any bridge. So what would the tunnel be like? Building a single tube of that length would be madness. So there's another way: 3 parallel tunnels. 2 for trains and 1 service tunnel for cables, ventilation, and emergency exits. Cross passages every few hundred feet would link them. If something goes wrong, you can easily move to the next tunnel. Pretty much like the Channel Tunnel, just in harsher, colder conditions, and on a bigger scale. And the key thing here isn't steel or concrete, it's air. It has to keep moving to prevent stuffiness and condensation. Pressure and temperature are controlled automatically, no fogged up windows or dampness. In case of an emergency, the tunnel doesn't turn into a trap. There's backup power, emergency comms, and even capsules where people can wait things out until the problem's fixed. That's essential, because in the Bering Strait, no one's coming to help in 5 minutes. You have to rely on yourself. Basically, you're not just building a tunnel, you're building an underground city that sustains itself. Air, energy, water, everything provided from within. Besides, the tunnel could be used for more than transport. It could carry communication lines, internet cables, and power grids. It's not just a route, it's an artery that truly connects 2 continents, linking not only people, but technology too. And one more thing, this tunnel should last not for decades, but for centuries. There can be no "we'll fix it later." The materials must be ultra-durable, resistant to moisture, pressure, and time. The sections, the strongest steel and concrete with flexible shock absorbers between them that can withstand even quakes. Sounds ambitious, doesn't it? However, there's another problem. Altogether, it's a legendary project that'll go down in human history. It sounds like science fiction, but it's possible. We know how to dig underwater. We know how to build roads where it seems almost impossible. Still, despite all that, it might turn out that nobody needs this tunnel at all. The most challenging project in human history. The biggest issue with this kind of project isn't the concrete or the depth, it's the money. To build a tunnel under the Bering Strait, you'd need insane amounts of it. This isn't just expensive, it's the scale of a continental project where every foot costs as much as a skyscraper. Because besides the tunnel itself, you'd have to build power plants, maintenance bases, communication systems, lay underwater cables, and all that in places where there isn't even asphalt. Just delivering the materials would cost a fortune, since all the equipment and machinery would have to be shipped by boat, helicopter, or across the ice. And a tunnel like that isn't a business venture, it's a prestige project. Almost symbolic. Money would have to be poured into it for decades without any return. Any delay or overspending by just a few percent turns into extra billions. And when the construction site is one of the most remote spots on Earth, just keeping the project running already costs a fortune. There's no way to save a little here. If you're digging under the Bering Strait, you'll have to spend as if you're building a whole new continent. Alright, let's say the massive funding is somehow available. Then comes another problem. How will the trains even get to the tunnel? On both sides lies wild, untouched land with no federal highways in sight. On the Russian side, the nearest railway ends in Yakutia. about 1,240 miles from the proposed tunnel entrance. Between them lie tundra, swamps, mountains, and permafrost. There isn't even stable cell service, let alone a highway. The American side isn't much better. Sure, Alaska is rich, but its infrastructure depends on a single aging oil pipeline and a couple of highways. From Fairbanks to the northern coast, there are hundreds of miles of emptiness. And beyond that, it gets worse. There's not even a dirt road leading to Cape Prince of Wales, where the tunnel's entrance or exit would be. Tiny villages of 200 or 300 people are scattered there, supplied by planes or over the ice in winter. Talking about a railway there's like talking about building a subway in Antarctica. You'd need new railroads, power grids, stations, depots, fuel bases, and housing for workers. That's thousands of miles of track across permafrost where every support has to be designed to handle freezing cold and every sleeper shifting ground. In other words, before laying the first tunnel section, you'd have to literally build a road to it. And that's not just preparation, it's a separate mega project of its own. Some experts even give cost estimates that sound totally insane. For the Russian side alone, the necessary infrastructure could cost $100 to $115 billion, or even over $170 billion by other estimates. And in North America, the estimates look even grimmer. Preparation costs could reach $170 to $200 billion. Add the tunnel itself on top, and you're talking about a project worth the budget of a mid-sized country. But let's imagine the tunnel has already been built, along with all the necessary infrastructure. A new route is opened up, linking Eurasia and North America. What happens next? Of course, putting aside today's geopolitical realities, we don't even need to guess. Experts already have an opinion on this. The sea route between Asia and America is long, unpredictable, and expensive. A tanker can take 2 weeks, or it can get stuck because of a storm or a traffic jam in port. The tunnel would change all that. Trains run on schedule. They're not afraid of bad weather, and they don't have to wait until the container ship ahead of them is unloaded. That means goods arrive on time and costs go down. For business, it's like winning extra time in a lottery. Every extra day of shipping means frozen money, and the faster the goods reach the buyer, the faster the economy moves. Even if delivery becomes just 5 to 10% cheaper, the impact would be huge. Lower production costs mean lower prices in stores. Not only corporations would feel it, but ordinary people too. If we talk about trade between Asia and the U.S. East Coast, the difference is striking. Usually that journey takes 25 to 35 days. And if there's a traffic jam in the Panama Canal, then delivery might take even longer. The tunnel would cut that time roughly in half. Russia and Europe could trade with the U.S. directly by rail. On the map, it looks beautiful. A single railway line stretching from London to New York. Trains go through Siberia, dive under the Bering Strait, surface in Alaska, and continue into the States. But in reality, of course, that's very far and long. For example, a train from London to New York would have to travel about 15,500 miles. Any other European departure point would still mean an extremely long journey. But what about efficiency? Experts estimate that up to 400 million tons of cargo could move through this new route every year, and eventually it might carry up to 3% of all global trade. You could say entire economies would pass through the tunnel. It'd be something like a modern version of the Panama or Suez Canal. The eastern part of Russia, through which the route would pass, would turn from no man's land into a busy corridor. New settlements, stations, warehouses, roads. Where today there's only silence and wind, there'd be jobs, people, and infrastructure. Even the far north of Chukotka would get a second life. Cargo, tourists, investments would flow there. Alaska would benefit too. Right now it lives mostly off oil and government money, but if it finds itself at the crossroads of global routes, logistics companies will rush in. People will no longer be leaving because there will finally be a reason to stay. Let's not forget about transit revenues either. Russia, China, and the U.S. could charge fees for using the line, just like they do with oil and gas pipelines. The Bering Strait Tunnel will become a new version of the Silk Road, only for the 21st century, with trains instead of caravans and microchips and batteries instead of silk. Still, the main beneficiaries would be the U.S. and Russia, because the whole project, including the transport network and the tunnel, would open the door to the treasure chest of both countries. It's going to get hot in the Arctic. The Arctic, the region where the project will be built, isn't just about permafrost, snow, and wild nature. It's a real treasure chest where under miles of frozen ground lie riches that could make any economist's eyes light up. Take Chukotka, for example. There alone, you'll find about 2,000 tons of gold reserves. On top of that, the region holds millions of tons of copper, molybdenum, silver, tin, and tungsten. And of course, what's the Arctic without oil and gas? The shelves of the Chukchi and East Siberian seas hide massive reserves that are only beginning to be explored. In Alaska, the story's much the same. On the North Slope, over 30 billion barrels of oil and more than 46 trillion cubic feet of gas have been discovered. It's home to one of the oldest and largest fields, Prudhoe Bay, discovered back in 1968. Today, the U.S. is betting on new projects like Willow, approved in 2023. Its potential, about 180,000 barrels of oil per day, makes it one of the biggest oil projects in recent decades. As for metals, Alaska has the Red Dog Mine, one of the world's largest sources of zinc and lead, and bornite, rich in copper. But the problem is, all this wealth isn't sitting somewhere near Moscow or Washington. It's out where winter hits minus 58 degrees Fahrenheit, and summer means icy fog. The Arctic remains hard to reach. There are no proper roads, the sea route works only a few months a year, and flying heavy equipment in is way too expensive. Because of that, existing deposits are developed far more slowly than desired, and many others are just dots on the map, places where mining could happen if the costs weren't so high. In this regard, a tunnel under the strait could become the game changer. It would connect the infrastructures of the two countries and make it possible to exchange not only goods, but also energy, technology, and people. It's like linking the two ends of a chain so it can finally start working. Experienced countries. You know what could be a really good advantage for a potential Bering Strait tunnel project? The fact that many countries are interested in it, which means it could draw on their experience. Take China, for instance, the country where it feels like everyone knows how to build some kind of mind-blowing tunnel. There's a tunnel called Fenghushan, and its length isn't impressive, just 0.8 miles, a far cry from the 50 miles needed under the Bering Strait, but Fenghushan is the highest tunnel in the world. It lies 3 miles above sea level. Imagine that, almost 3 miles up with thin air, little oxygen, yet people and machines still have to operate normally. At that altitude, ordinary fatigue turns into a real challenge. Workers quickly run out of breath, machinery malfunctions, and even simple operations take twice as long. The key engineering feature there is the oxygen supply system. When they first started digging, the progress was slow, about 6 to 10 feet per day, because people just couldn't work for long in the thin air. But after installing an oxygen station that pumps around 700 cubic feet of oxygen per hour at over 92% purity, things changed dramatically. The pace jumped to 16 to 26 feet a day. So just adding oxygen alone doubled productivity. It wasn't some luxury, it was absolutely vital. Without it, the project would have stalled for a long time. Another problem was the climate and water. In the mountains, water can seep through rock cracks at the worst possible moment, and without powerful drainage pumps and a proper water diversion system, the site would be flooded in hours. They had to install big pumps and create complex waterproofing. Then there's the heat. Inside the tunnel, temperatures could reach 104 degrees Fahrenheit because of the machinery, so they set up a strong ventilation and air cooling system. As for the rock itself, that was tricky too. The area had a mix of loose rocks, sandstones, clay, and fractured limestone. That meant the tunnel walls had to be reinforced right away with steel bars and solid concrete lining. If you delayed reinforcement for later, you'd risk collapses and all sorts of trouble. So the construction went in a drill, reinforce rhythm with no long breaks. China can handle massive projects that let you cross stretches of water. A great example is the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge. Although perhaps a bridge sounds too simple, what you're looking at is a real engineering puzzle. There's a bridge, a tunnel, and artificial islands. All of it's put together like a giant construction set to connect 3 cities separated by the South China Sea. Construction started in 2009 and lasted almost 9 years. The main challenge was that the strait here reaches a depth of 130 feet, plus strong currents and frequent typhoons. Installing concrete supports when every wave hits like a hammer and the wind topples cranes is dangerous, so everything had to be calculated precisely. The supports were made massive, each weighing thousands of tons and sinking into the ground for tens of feet. They weren't just set vertically, but aligned with the current so the structure could withstand storms. The hardest part is the underwater section, 4 miles long. It wasn't drilled like a regular tunnel, it was built from huge concrete segments, each about 590 feet long and over 70,000 tons. These blocks were made in a factory, then floated into position, lowered to the seabed, and connected with incredible precision. To make them sit perfectly, the seabed was leveled in advance, and the joints were sealed with a waterproof, pressure-resistant sealant. To build this tunnel, they had to create 2 artificial islands, which became the tunnel's entrances and exits. The islands were literally built from scratch by dumping millions of cubic feet of sand. One of them, by the way, is constantly moving. Because of the soft seabed, it sinks slightly, so engineers added flexible compensators and a settlement monitoring system. Even if the island sinks a couple of inches, the tunnel won't crack. Work had to be done while constantly fighting the elements. At the peak of construction, more than 14,000 people and over 300 ships were involved. Workers lived on floating bases because commuting every day was impossible. And even with everything perfectly organized, typhoons happened. Sometimes the project was paused for weeks because waves were taller than the cranes. The crossing is also smart. It has hundreds of sensors monitoring load, temperature, vibrations, and even wind speed. If anything goes wrong, a signal is sent to the control center, and the engineering team can head out immediately. It all looks simple, but behind the project is one of the most complex engineering systems in the world, and this experience will definitely come in handy at the Bering Strait.